I'm being recorded. I'm a researcher in family medicine and community health here at KU Med. And this is the first session of our summer book, The Color of Law, A Forgotten History of How Our Government Segregated America by Richard Rothstein. So we'll discuss this book, oops, how do I advance? Today and then next month too, in July. And then to finish out the summer, in August, I wanted to remind you, I mentioned this last time, that we will have a screening of the short documentary, The Land of Opportunity, and a discussion with the filmmaker, Nicholas Nico Wiggins. So we look forward to that. And before we kind of jump into the subject of The Color of Law, I always like to take a minute to remember, why are we gathering together in this book club at KU Med, at an academic medical center? Why do we do this? And this is to understand the history, patterns, and systems that have created our current situation, to practice talking about racism and racial disparities. In this space, we are hoping for our personal learning and growth to create a shift within ourselves, to provoke an emotional state, may it be discomfort, empathy, outrage, that will ultimately raise our consciousness, and with the ultimate goal of committing to action and systems change. So, again, why do we care about learning about the history? Why do we care about understanding the systems here, at a medical institution? And that's because we care about health and this history. Can you see me moving you just see my slides, right? Okay. Moving the box of faces around so I can see them. We care about health, and once we get this bigger picture of all the things that play into health, then it becomes clear that all of this history, the systems, the patterns of our racial oppression in our country all tie directly into health. And so this is the public health framework for reducing health disparities. And if you look on the very right side, this is downstream, where we see disease, injury, and death. And so in healthcare, we've gotten really good at looking at right immediately upstream, looking at what are the behaviors that are actually leading to some disease and death. And so we've focused a lot on helping people change health behaviors, or focusing on this. And then in the last 10, 15 years or so, researchers and other health professionals have really focused on, well, it's actually these living conditions, right? And we kind of call these the social determinants of health that are, causing some of these health behaviors, or preventing people from making, better health behavior choices. So your access to food, your access to, a safe place to live, and access to places to exercise. But now in, more recent years, we're really looking, it's further upstream. It's institutional inequities that are driving the living conditions that people can attain. And upstream of that are social inequities, right? And racism is a major one of these. And so this is why it's so important for us to do the reading and the discussion and the learning that we're doing here in this space. So this is another way to look at it, because I've shown that the other slide a lot. And I think this is a really a good way to look at this too. So you can see that racism causes health outcomes, affects health outcomes in many different ways. And one of them is directly by the stress of racism to the body. So what stress can do to a human body, and then the weathering effect and all of that. And some of you may know more about that. Another way is the interpersonal clinical interaction. Racism will come up during that clinical interaction, and it may, we know from the research, may actually impact clinical decision making, based on implicit bias and other things. So there's those. And then the other way in which racism will impact all of these factors that you see here. And this is, a big list of things that ultimately impact your health. So racism has an impact on social capital, education, all of these things, access to transportation, employment, access to food, also health behaviors, and socioeconomic status. So, one of the the arguments that people like to bring up a lot is that it's not really about race, it's about socioeconomic status, right? So we know that if you have less access to money and power and then you'll have less access to food and in good education and job and all of these things. And that's really what's at play here. And somehow those folks are missing the giant yellow bubble right to the left of this picture, right? And saying that, like, why then are, all of these people of color experiencing lower socioeconomic status? It's not just their behavior. It's not just their choices. It's look at the upstream causes. So if you're not tired of hearing this, I'll say it one more way. And that is that the driver of racial health disparities, which we have a huge problem of in our country, the driver is structural racism. It's not biology. We have lumped race in with biology for long enough. And, in healthcare and even the way we teach in medical schools, we just sort of lump it in there. But race, there is no Black physiology. Skin, lungs, heart, reproductive system all function the same as those of all humans. It's not equivalent to genetics. Race is not. It's a social, political, and power structure. And the problem is that we've normalized the biological, the behavioral explanations for health disparities, and this changes the way we think about the causes and the solutions. So to get to solutions, we really need to understand the true history of the causes. So at this point in these meetings, I would normally share with you some slides and give a little presentation to summarize some of the reading that we've all done, and then we'll break into groups. But in the case of The Color of Law, there is a beautifully made short 17-minute documentary film that's narrated by the author, Richard Rothstein. So we will watch that together. And then after that, I have some questions I'll share, and then we'll break out into small groups and discuss those questions and then come back for the last 10 minutes together. So now we cross our fingers that technology works and everyone can see this video. For about a 20-minute, 25-minute discussion. So just be thinking, what stood out to you from the video or from what you've read? Was anything new to you? Think about the intergenerational impact of racial segregation. How does it impact health, wealth, education? And then finally, what do you know about your own community and your local zoning policies during the 20th century? All right, so let me stop sharing. Let me put this in the chat so we all have it. And then we'll break it out. Okay. Okay, there we go. Ready? Here we go. We're all back. Well, we were having a great discussion in there. How about others? Does anyone want to share kind of what you were talking about in your small group?
I'll just say for our group, I feel like we had a great, just barely scratching the surface of how these generational impacts, we had just started to tap into kind of the talking about maternal health and how that, how we've made this transition from these social structures and governmental imposed structures and how that has impacted healthcare specifically. So there's just so much there to talk about.
We were talking in our group about, I think it feels frustrating sometimes thinking about how much evidence is out there. I mean, this video, how can you watch this video and not understand, how big of a problem systemic racism is and the impacts that it has? And then we're just like, how many people are actually taking in this, even though it's all out there? There's plenty of books and videos and all of this But you know, what percentage of our circles are watching this? I put the link in the chat. Send it out, email it out to 10 people, 20 people. I don't know. I mean, just, I think it's important to get it out there.
That's a great call, Christina. I'm going to go ahead and copy that into my Facebook page today and go ahead and post it on Facebook, see what folks got to say. I'm going to do that. Thank you for calling, giving us a call to action around this.
I'm doing it right now, Todd. I'm already put it on my Facebook page.
Oh, that's okay. Now everyone's going to think I'm cutting and pasting from you, which is fine because that happens a lot anyway. So.
I think one of the big challenges that we skated on, but aren't, really weren't able to come to any conclusions about is how do you repair the damage done from, generations of policies like this, right? Where, it's unrealistic to think that our government is going to like undo the highways and, repair a community back to what it was before they wrecked it with eminent domain. But then, and just what do you do, right, to repair the damage done to communities like this? What kind of commitment is that going to take, from people who have benefited from it, right?
I don't know what's realistic, but I think for me, this is the clearest cut case for reparations. It's just so in your face and obvious, the disparities that have been caused.
And the assets that are lost. When you lose, an asset like a home, which is a profit building enterprise in our country, one of the ones that we look to in our country. When you lose those assets, you lose generations of opportunity to build wealth, right?
Yeah, Todd, you're absolutely right. And Jason, I was thinking the same thing. And a lot of people don't understand that home ownership and the equity and how that has impacted, why even now, and I think about I'll just use me as an example. We're always looking at the equity we have in our homes because it's like, this is how you leave a legacy for your children. But how many Black folks actually have homes that they've owned and have equity in their homes to do that? And so you think about sending your kids to school, you think about, like they were saying, taking care of parents in retirement. And so, any talk about reparations or any talk about how do we remedy it, I don't even know if it could be clearly remedied. But I think certainly we need to start talking about, okay, my children need to be going to school for free.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
At the very least, Lynette, at the very least. At the very least, we need to be getting a lot of things for free, actually.
Yes. I'm like, my student loan should have been paid for.
Yes, that should be free for us too.
Long time ago. Now, I have a question. Which group, out of all of the groups who have been impacted by something, which group has yet to receive reparations? The only group. Does anybody know?
The Japanese got reparations who were interred.
Oh, who haven't?
Who has not?
Oh,
Who
has not.
Black folk.
Who's
Black
the only
folk,
group?
we
Okay.
have not. Yeah.
That's what was like, we haven't. But I'm trying to also follow that Chicago suburb, Evanston, where reparations was voted as approved. And I just wonder how the funds will be allocated, what will really come. And I think there'll be an interesting case study to follow. I put a link in the chat if anyone has information on that, or maybe we can bring in, I think there was a councilwoman leading that effort. Might be interesting to talk to her in the future.
I'll just say, as someone who was raised in Kansas City, went to public school, went to KU, is in med school now. This is some of the first time that I've been hearing about Kansas City's history, because this wasn't taught to me when we learned about it in school here in Kansas City. And Dr. Glenn does wonderful videos for our classes teaching about the history of Kansas City and zoning. But I'm kind of just flabbergasted learning about how so much has been built off of racism that I didn't know about until now. I'm in my late 20s, and like the, hot debate of people who are against reparations, and and then being like, how could you not see that that's the obvious answer, and then realizing it's probably because they don't know. They haven't been taught. We don't make this a priority. We make this this is another state's problem. This didn't happen here. This is, this was in the South. And it's like, no, this is an American problem. This was everywhere. It's what our city was built off of. And that's not okay. So I really appreciate the learning I'm doing. I also feel like an idiot because I'm doing it so late in life, but I'm trying.
But I don't think that's your fault. I think that, I think we need to hold our school systems accountable. I don't think that's your fault that you didn't learn that. Like they took it out, like Lynette said earlier, they took it out. And she continues to have the conversation at her dinner table with her kids. So she feels responsible to have that conversation. And look at what you're doing now, you're learning now. And that's where we'll hold all of us accountable as we move forward, is that we're doing it now. Even if you didn't learn it until your 20s, you're learning it now. But they took it out of, it never was in the books. I don't want to say they took it out. It was never there. So I stand corrected. It was never there. So I don't say you should feel like an idiot. I just wanted to.
But I also think we shouldn't acknowledge that we did know. We know that there was gross inequity in this country. We know that our grandfathers were white. They made a higher wage for the same work as their Black co-workers, because that was totally common practice for generations, that Black people didn't make the same amount of money as white people. And we've been subtly robbed throughout our entire history. First, our labor was taken for free, and then when we were paid, we were undercompensated because we weren't seen as equal. So it's kind of bullshit that we didn't know. We did know, we just don't want to know. We don't want to take any responsibility for the knowing, and we don't want to understand that we all share in this. Our grandfathers knew that they were making, 25 cents more than their Black coworker who was sitting right next to them. They knew that. They knew that the Black people that they knew couldn't live in the same neighborhoods, they knew that, and they accepted all that. So we did know. We accepted, this is the way it is. What can I do about it? And people will still say that same thing today, but we all share in this. We're all guilty. We're all a part of it, and we do know.
Thank you, Hakima. I think Lynette, that was what I was trying to say earlier. Christina and Lynette, how do we not know? Hakima just put it into words for me. So thank you, Hakima. With all the evidence was there, it's been there. How do we not know? So thank you, Hakima, for making it plain. I appreciate that.
Absolutely. Well, and I'll go back to the point that the brainwashing is real. Yeah, because and we know, and then the narrative gets twisted. I made the 25 cents more because I'm better, or because it gets twisted. Yeah. It gets twisted. Right. And so again, the case for we need to take back our narrative. But
absolutely. Absolutely. I agree.
Oh, yes. Thank you all for these great points and great conversations. So come back July 13th. I think it's the 13th, second Tuesday in July, and we'll talk about this book again.
Okay.
All right.